We've got from La Crosse, is it Ian or Ian?
Ian.
Ian, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Pretty good. What's up?
All right, so I saw a YouTube video about a week ago, and it had like 6 things that naturalism does not account for, or something like that, and I made a response which refuted 4 of them, but I'm not really sure that I like my answer to 2 of them, and they were, it doesn't account for absolute laws of logic or objective truth. And other than the fact that that doesn't prove any specific God, what problems are there with that?
Well, first of all, who said that naturalism was supposed to be an explanation for everything? I mean, assuming one is a naturalist and one has adopted a naturalist philosophical position, the fact that it doesn't answer everything doesn't prove that it's not true. The fact that we haven't explained everything by way of naturalistic explanations only demonstrates that we have not yet explained them. It doesn't demonstrate that they are impossible to be explained.
Okay.
So when somebody says naturalism can't explain this, it's like saying evolution doesn't explain the origins of life. Well, okay, maybe that's beyond it. Now, I realize that naturalism is a more broad and explanation, but actually a better analogy would be saying that, well, science hasn't explained X yet. Okay, so what? That doesn't mean that science can't explain it. It doesn't mean that it's beyond explanation. That is a big kind of argument from ignorance of, you can't explain this using your methodology. Therefore, we're justified in positing supernatural explanations. No, you're not. There are no more. It's back. You could use this argument for anything. Going back to the lightning bolts I was talking about before. Once upon a time, those people with a naturalistic worldview had no explanation for lightning bolts, and people then felt that they were justified in positing supernatural explanations. They were not justified. They were wrong, and eventually we found an explanation. Now, we may never find an explanation for some things, but I find that a lot of the objections that people launch against this, like I was talking in the last call, and you may look up the discussion or debate that I had with Matt Slick on this show about the transcendental argument for the existence of God, because the logical absolutes and things like that are what tend to come up in these discussions. Oh, naturalism can't explain this. Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure that you're making some kind of category error there, because the nature of the logical absolutes are such that they don't exist as things that need an explanation. They are simply true. They are, you know, the thing we went round and round about is Matt tried to say that everything is either physical or conceptual. And I was saying that no, that's not a true dichotomy. There are things like the absolutes that are neither. And he wasn't accepting that answer because I couldn't put a name on the category. And one of the potential names that I should have come up with was right there in his argument, and that is transcendent or transcendental according to the definitions we were using. The simpler thing is that these things are simply true. Their value that we build on, the laws of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, are things that we build on to create the structure of thought and reasoning. But they don't exist as things. They didn't come into being with the universe. They didn't come into being because of a thought. They're simply true. And so people tend to say, naturalism can't explain that. So what? The fact that you don't have an explanation doesn't make some other explanation true.
Yeah, that's definitely where to hang your hat is you know, it's an argument from incredulity, right, or argument from ignorance. So that's where a good place to stop, because you can get these logical things you can get wrapped around pretty easily by the theists, especially ones like Matt Slick, who kind of know all the rhetorical tricks and these sorts of things. So, you know, it's their burden of proof to say, hey, you know, where did these things come from and how did they come about, and you know, the fact that they're there is not necessarily a proof of God. So I hope that helps, Ian.
Yeah, the response that I gave was that, well, first of all, they're assuming that the default state of the universe is that truth is not absolute or truth is subjective or something like that. And the second thing they're assuming is that if God existed, that would somehow change that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are big assumptions, both
Yeah.
of them. Yeah.
Because when you start talking about, objective reality, objective truth, things like that, you're probably on murky ground, and you're probably dealing with somebody that's saying, you don't have an answer for this, and I do think that I have an answer for this, therefore mine is more viable and your entire worldview is crap. And that's, I mean, it's almost something that I think is so asinine we shouldn't even have to respond to it. Unfortunately, as we saw with Hal and others who have convinced themselves that they're open-minded, that they are investigating using principles that are rational, when they hear something that confirms or is consistent with what they already believe to be true, they latch onto it. And it becomes an oh duh moment. And I did the same thing. I had, and I've talked about this before, I had an oh duh moment that was probably one of the stupidest things I've ever done. And that was, I asked a member of my family who was, from my view, somebody who was wise and intelligent and a good Christian who made good arguments. And I was asking, how do I argue with an atheist? And he said, oh, well, you just have to ask them where their morals come from, because they can't possibly have any objective source for morals. And I said, I mean, I had an oh duh moment. Like, of course. That's, how did I not see that before? It's so obvious. And then I went out and used it. And boy, am I glad I did.
You got smacked around, probably.
Yeah. I was, the difference, of course, being that once somebody made a demonstration of why that was one of the stupidest things anybody could say, I went, oh, yeah, how could I have been that dumb? There's something different about, there's some presupposition, some protective shell, some compartmentalization, and it's probably different for most people. There's not going to be one answer or one argument that solves it for everybody, but we make mistakes. And boy, do we tend to latch onto things. I mean, I used to glibly point out, to some callers that of the two of them, I'm the only one that's demonstrated he could actually change his mind. They're calling in to preach the things that I used to believe, and I changed my mind, and here's why I changed it. Can you give a refutation for the reasons that I changed it? And no, of course they can't, because their beliefs are based on faith, their personal experience, or interpretation, etc. Yeah, I like what you're doing, and I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, and that absolute morals thing was one of the other four things the guy said, and that was actually the easiest one to refute. So. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're closing in on out of time, so I got to let you go so I can get to at least one more caller.
All right.
Thank you for your call.
Thanks, Ian.
I think he said bye.